it's a reasonable general starting point, with the exception of something Jacob might present. But we'll leave that for a moment. So yeah, I think that's the reasonable starting point, right? There is something. There must have always been something. If there was ever nothing, nothing would come from nothing. So it's reasonable that because there is something, there must have always been something. And so, what is that something? That's usually what we're getting into the conversation.
Okay. All right. So, and my presumption is that I have to be and it should remain agnostic as to what that something is until I've had good reason to give it a description or some qualifiers or a name, perhaps. Would that be fair?
I mean, you could just take my word for it, and it's a law, and we can move forward, right? And you have a lot of, you could have a happy life beyond that. But yeah, if you want to take the approach of everything has to.
You want to take the long road.
The long road, yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, people. The way I look at it is most of the hypotheses I see coming either from physicists or mathematicians or religious people. Some people say they know things, but I don't think anybody really knows. I mean, the closest I would think anybody would get would be physicists and mathematicians that look at things, and as far as I can tell, they're saying that there could be, an infinite regress. That there's just always been this contraction and expansion of the universe, and it just is, right? Is there anything wrong with that? I mean, is there some fault?
Yeah, there's a few things there, right? So one, the physicists, the way they're determining what they know is not to reach certain knowledge. The mathematician has a type of, certain knowledge, like truth regarding mathematics. The religious person is presenting something different. Right? It's not saying that, hey, we're doing what the physicist is doing. So, but these aside, though, I think you did something right now at the very beginning of this, which was good philosophy in a sense, right? Like you came to the understanding that there must have always been something. Now, is that something that you're not sure about? Is that something that is probabilistic? Like, is that something based on your experience that you just think it's that way?
Okay. It's partly intuitive on my part to think that there must have always been something because my human mind, I think, the only thing I know is cause and effect. There's a glass of water on the table, and I reach it and push it with my hand, and it falls over, and it's going to spill. So my mind is predispositioned and biased to want to think in terms of that.
But did we even get into cause and effect yet?
Well, I think it lends to whether or not I believe there could just be something. It always has to be something. I suppose intuitively I want to think there always has to be something. I guess is what I was trying to say. So.
Yeah, but it's
no,
like
I find it that's fine. The reason is because you live your life based on the things that you know, the things that you experience, and this is how you make your decisions. So based on the things that you know, you notice that everything you see around you requires an explanation, and then this naturally follows that everything we're in, including the universe, requires an explanation. Am I right?
Yeah. Thank you very much. You articulated. But however, I'm also okay based on the science that there doesn't have to be an explanation. It just is, right? And we might not ever know. And it just seems to put any kind of a label on it. It's just a Band-Aid to cover up ignorance.
Yeah, but just to address that quickly, Nuri, I think you took one more step, though, right? Just previously, you didn't just work off of your intuition. You also thought about the logical contradiction, right? That the impossibility of nothing producing something, right? The logical contradiction to say that nothing is the cause of something. So I think you took one more step there and used, logical reasoning deduction to come to this understanding. You didn't say, "Oh, I'm doing an experiment." You didn't say, "Is this some sort of mathematical proof?" You didn't say, "Is this a religious text?" So there's one more step there that's occurring, which is using your reason to come to an understanding, which is beyond just your intuition. And I think what we're addressing here, I'm trying to establish that it's on its outset is not based on the observations of physics. So in order for us to address, cause and effect, and whether or not things have an explanation, your approach to physics, the field of physics, utilizes those axioms, right? The whole point of physics is that, look, there are patterns, so let me observe what the patterns are. There's a cause and effect, somehow relationship, and so let me try to identify what that is, and then let me explain it by this placeholder or that placeholder, right? And further, there is this something couldn't have come from nothing, right? So maybe let's understand what its properties are. So I don't think you're going to use physics here to reject your position that you started with.
Yeah, and this may sound silly, and help me if it is, but I'm not sure that I'd be willing to say that something can't come from nothing. I don't know that we know that.
Okay, so let's think about that. I think that's an important starting point, right?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, maybe I should say, maybe it's a silly thing for me to say. Maybe I sound ignorant right now. I don't know, but
No,
it's like
that's fine. That's completely fine.
Yeah, in another universe, right, another world, where we're not bound with these laws of physics, and there's other things happening that we just can't even imagine. It could be the case that something comes from nothing, and that may be, I don't know, right? I just don't think we know. I may be sounding ignorant. So yeah.
No, it's fine. I mean, this is something. It requires your thinking. You have to think about it. So number one, it's not based on observation. Right? This is purely deductive reasoning. Right? So I'm not going to tell you that no one's going to claim that they've ever observed something coming from nothing. So that's not the case, right? So there's no claim of like empirical observation. Also, the understanding, right, that things come from things is not reduced simply to our empirical observation. And I think when you ask yourself, so let me ask you a couple of questions, right? What is nothing?
It's the absence of something,
right?
And
so what properties does it have?
It doesn't have any properties.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
The absence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So really nothing. Yeah, nothing is just a term that we're using to explain not things, right? It's not a thing itself. So at the very outset, it's not a thing itself. It has no properties. So to say about it anything is meaningless, right? To say about it that it caused something, it doesn't follow. It is not a thing to cause. It has no properties to cause. It has no property. It's nothing to even. It's not even part of the equation. I guess what I'm trying to say, right? So it doesn't follow that I could say about it that it might be the cause of something. The it there is not a thing. Right? So every time I articulate a sentence about it, nothing caused something. Nothing, has the ability. Whatever you want to say about it, you just can't say anything about it. Like all of those sentences are going to be incoherent because nothing is not a thing to talk about.
Yeah, no. So I agree. I agree with what Brother Bashad said, but I believe what we should focus on is, like what Jeff said earlier. Saying that you live your life by the things that you know, and you make the decisions accordingly. So Jeff, when you talk about this topic, right, we're not expecting you to talk about things that you don't know. When you say that, it could be an infinite regression, this is something that you don't know. And, this is something that we could bring reasoning to that it cannot be the case. It has been rejected in many logical conclusions. But this is not something this decision of you accepting this is not based on things that you know. So based on what would you accept this?
Well, right now, my willingness to consider infinite regress is based on my rudimentary understanding of some papers and things that I have read from top mathematicians and physicists. So it would have to be some evidence from the scientific field that would conclusively say, hey, look, infinite regress is just not possible. It didn't happen. It's a silly idea. Conclusively that the field of science just accepts that that's, a failed theory. Then that would probably something.
Science doesn't reject everything, but this whole idea of infinite regression is not scientific. It's not built on science. Science does not conclude this matter because the idea of infinite regression is it does not logically follow, and science is built on logic in most cases.
Yeah, and to be more specific, Nuri, like science cannot investigate infinite regression. It's just not something investigatable by the empirical method. So I think you're probably applying, Jeff, maybe the wrong tool to try to understand if this is a possibility or not. And I think on the question of possibility, I don't think there's a problem with the logical possibility of infinity. The question just is, are things actually infinite? And that's a different question of can things be infinite?
Well, I would agree that it's a different question, but again, the body of science that I seem to understand, seems to say that infinite regress is not a problem as far as the existence of the universe. And I'm willing to, but I'm not a physicist. I'm not a mathematician. I'm an engineer. So I'm open to some evidence. And again, I'm not convinced that there's infinite regress, and I'm not convinced that there is an uncaused cause.
But every scientist that you know and that I know that mentions an infinite regress is taking off their hat as a scientist and putting on their hat as a philosopher, right? So this is not a question of empirical evidence. They're not using empirical evidence to say that infinite regress, because of our observation of the data, is a possibility, right? They're saying that because of our understanding of logic, right, here are the possibilities. Infinite regress, beginning.
Okay, so you're saying because they're having to postulate something that can't be observable, it's no longer science. It goes into the realm of philosophy at that point. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, there are just some things that are not empirically testable, and so there's no scientists are not going to say because of our observation of the data we've reached this conclusion. That none of them are doing that, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, I would agree. But so you're saying that the idea of infinite regress has to come from the philosophical. Okay. So then are you saying that scientists are not equipped to speak to it because it's a philosophical topic?
I mean, scientists that are philosophically trained are, but I mean, if a scientist is going to try to tell you that, they ran an experiment and it concluded that it's a possibility, I mean, that just doesn't follow. You can't run experiments with infinity.
Yeah, but they've got concepts, and I've seen enough to know, and they have, concepts of infinities, and there are mathematical proofs that include infinities, and so there's a lot of smart people that know how to deal with those things. I wouldn't begin to pretend to know. So I think let's
take that example, Jeff, right? So in mathematics, there's no problem with infinity. You can count from 1 to, you're not going to reach infinity, but you're going to continue counting, right? So how would you translate that to a scientific experiment, right? Like there's no way to complete that experiment. Even if you assume that there might be an infinite number of things out there, and you just start counting, like you're never going to reach anything. So there's no experiment.
So can I comment after a while? Maybe after when you can let me comment.
Hey, you guys have been gracious. I'll stop here and let someone else come in and have a conversation. I appreciate it. This is a very interesting conversation. I learned some things. So thanks, guys.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome. Go ahead, Jay.
Hello. Yeah. What I just wanted to say is what the scientists would do in this case is they might build models, and I think it has been done. If you follow the arguments that William Lane Craig has with his Kalam, these come up where these physicists, I'm not even sure they're interested in the religious debates, but that's the idea of the string theory, everything. They're trying to find some way, some explanation for how how the universe began and stuff like that, or a model of maybe the multiverse or something like that. So some have built models that that didn't have a beginning, or had like a crush phase and a bounce phase, and all they would just have to do is that they would see if there's any kind of like contradictory issues or some problems with the model, which would mean that they might have to improve it. That's all they can do, but you can't have to point to them that if you want to call this science, you need to prove that it's infinite, but now you can't prove it. Now it's not science, you know. You don't need to do it that way, because they can leave it open. But even what they found now, they're never claiming that it's 100%. Maybe, in fact, the universe didn't begin 14 billion years ago. Maybe there's something they're missing. And it's actually 140 billion years ago it started. And they might find that out later. They never claim to have the truth. So someone can, yes, the scientists can build a model that never began and say, look, this is consistent. This is one of the ways in which it could be. And then it can see if the model is useful to do other things. And that's it. They don't need to prove. It doesn't follow that just because they won't be able to prove that it never began, that now it's not science.
But Jacob, the idea here is that this can be disproven, right? It has been logically disproven. It does not follow logically. And when you state that, okay, we do not know things, so are you basing your conclusion on hope? On hope that you will find things to prove it? Is that what you're basing your conclusion? Okay, we do not know certain things. So you're basing your conclusion that we hopefully will find something to prove it. But there's nothing to prove it. And in fact, it's logically incoherent. Because if you do have infinite regression, then nothing would ever start.
So has that been published somewhere that we can read definitively, that maybe a couple philosophers kind of like that's the explanation? Because I've been looking to see if there's anything on this, because I just hear this in apologist rooms. Like, where is the paper that I can look at to see that they've now disproven infinite regress? I've been looking.
No, like I said,
okay,
the claim that it's disproven as though it can be evaluated empirically is like saying, oh, has anybody disproven or proven the multiverse? Well, there's nothing to empirically observe about the multiverse. Just because it conforms with possible models, well, yeah, there's like I guess an infinite number of possible models of the ways to describe the universe, right?